Hi folks, my name is Greg Griffiths.
And I'm Hillary Stonelake Curtis.
We are attorneys here at Dunlap and Seeger, and we practice in employment and labor law. And the folks we work with are employers, and people who keep people busy, keep people employed is what we do. And what we're here to talk to you about today is the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is the federal law that governs wages and hours and minimum wage here in the United States. And the most significant issue we're going to talk about is changes to this law. They're going to take effect on December 1st, 2016. And what this change is basically going to do is make it harder for employers to designate employees as exempt employees, which means that they'd be exempt from the overtime requirement of the Fair Labor Standards Act. Because right now what that law says is these exempt employees don't have to get paid overtime for hours worked over 40 in a week. And exempt or non-exempt employees or hourly employees are required to be paid time and a half for all hours that they work over 40 hours in a week. Now, I mentioned these exemptions. What are these exemptions? Well, they're typically what are commonly known as the white-collar exemptions. They're called the executive exemption, the administrative exemption, the professional exemption, the outside sales exemption, and computer exemption. And the Department of Labor has certain rules that Hillary's going to talk about in a little while that define what employees fall under these exemptions. Now, when I talked about these tests, there's three basic requirements to meet these white-collar exemptions. Before I even get to these, though, I should mention that even though we call them white-collar exemptions, non-traditional white-collar positions do fall under these tests. So if you have someone, say perhaps a construction manager position, they can still meet these tests if they meet certain duties. So don't get too carried away just because I use the traditional word of these white-collar exemptions. So the first thing we do is we look at are they paid on a salary basis? If yes, you move on to the next part of the test. Number two, are they paid a specific minimum salary that meets the law? So if they're paid enough money in this basic salary, we then shift to the third part of the test, which means do their duties meet one of these specific exemptions that Hillary's going to talk to us about. So under the current law, what is that specified amount? Well, they have to earn at least $455 a week or $23,660 per year. So in other words, the salary has to be at least $455 a week or $23,660 in a year. And if they do that, then we shift to these exemptions. And as you can see from that $23,000 figure, it's really quite low. And so what the federal government has done with these new regulations, effective December 1st, is they're raising that threshold. So effective December 1st, that number is going to $913 per week, or $47,476 per year. So as you can see, we're in effect doubling that. And so if you have employees that are making more than 23 but less than the 47, they can't be designated as exempt employees under these new rules. And so the duties tests, though, haven't changed. And so if you earn at least the $913 a week or the $47,476 in a year, then we shift to the duties test. I should point out, though, that 10% of that total amount, or $91 a week, can be made up of bonuses, a 10% bonus, as long as it's non-discretionary. So if 10% of that 47 plus figure is in bonuses, that's okay, as long as it's non-discretionary, which means you have to pay it. And if it's tied to productivity or it's tied to something they have to earn, then it's likely not going to meet that definition of a non-discretionary bonus.
As Greg mentioned, once you meet the salary requirements for an exemption, you turn to the duties test. And these have not changed, as Greg mentioned, under the new rules, but they do apply to a few different areas. For example, the executive exemption. Under this, the duties test requires the employee's primary duties to include the management of your business or a recognized department or subdivision of your business. The employee must also regularly direct the work of 2 or more other full-time employees. They also have to have the authority to hire and fire other employees, or their recommendations are given particular weight by you when determining whether to hire or fire someone. Under the administrative exemption, which, as Greg mentioned, most of your employees will fall, their primary duty consists of performing office or non-manual work related to the management of your business or general business operations. They also have the ability to exercise discretion and independent judgment in matters of significance. In other words, these employees are performing the tasks that are keeping your business running. They include your managers and executive assistants. There are two types of professional exemptions: the learned professional exemption and the creative professional exemption, which I'll talk about here in a second. But under the learned exemption, this is what we're talking about with respect to your lawyers, your accountants, your doctors, and these employees are performing work that requires advanced knowledge in a field of science or learning, and this advanced knowledge is customarily acquired by a prolonged course of specialized instruction. Your creative professionals include your artists, your actors, your composers, novelists, and these professionals are engaged in work requiring invention, imagination, originality, or talent in an artistic or creative field. Under your computer employee exemption, these are your computer systems analysts, your computer programmers, software engineers, or other similarly skilled workers in the computer field, and their duties are related to whatever their field is, whether it's a a software engineer or a systems analyst. With respect to your outside salespeople, it's important to note that the minimum salary thresholds do not apply, but the primary duties test does, and that requires their duties to be making sales or obtaining orders or contracts for services from your business or for use of your facilities. And it requires customers to then pay you for those services or the use of those facilities. And the employee must be regularly away from your business soliciting new business and customers.
Now, of these different classifications that Hillary just talked about, there are some of them that can be employed by all by the same business. For example, you can have your executive that's paid an exempt position. You could have many administrators. You can have an IT person that meets the computer test. You can have outside salespeople that meet the outside sales test. So it really doesn't matter what type of business you're in, whether you're in construction or you're in retail or you're a professional organization, you could have employees that fall under all types of different classes. But when you get to these employees that don't meet the test, the hourly people, the one requirement that the Department of Labor puts on you, in addition to paying at least minimum wage and paying them overtime, is you have to track their hours. Now, the law doesn't dictate how you track their hours, but it has to be some method of recording the days that they work and the number of hours that they work each day. And what the Department of Labor says is those records have to be complete and they have to be accurate. And as long as they are, they can be on paper. You can have a computer timekeeping system. You can have some fancy software. You could have a time clock hanging on your wall, however you want to do it. But if you simply have a piece of paper that an employee fills out that says, hey, I worked Monday through Friday and I worked 8 hours each day, that's probably not going to cut it. And if the DOL comes in and does an audit, they're probably going to give you some grief about that. So make sure you keep the timekeeping accurately and with enough detail that you can track how many hours people are working every day. So what are your options? We know this rule's changed. The number's gone up from 23 plus to 47 plus. How do you handle that? Well, if you have employees that aren't making enough money, first, you can increase their pay and make sure that they're earning at least $47,476. You keep them exempt and you don't have to pay them overtime. I've been asked before, well, can I give them more duties? Sure you can. You can give people more duties if it fits within your organization so that it justifies paying them over $47,000 plus in a week. The other thing you can do is reclassify employees so they're no longer exempt and pay them less than $47,476, pay them overtime for all hours worked over 40. I get asked this question, can I take away some of their duties? Sure you can. You're the employer, you can define how you do that. And you can also reclassify employees so that if you have 4 people doing the same task and you're reallocating work to some to justify paying them more, you can reduce the pay of others because it isn't justified anymore. And those are all things that you can do because you're the person that's managing your business. So at the end of the day, if you're paying people least minimum wage, you're paying overtime for all hours worked over 40. The higher earners, the exempt employees, earn at least $47,476. You're in great shape, and you shouldn't have problems with the DOL under these new rules.
So what does this mean for the construction industry? Well, the first thing you need to do is audit your positions. Take a look at your employees and determine which of them will be affected by these new rule changes. Once you do that, you can make appropriate adjustments. You can determine, for example, like Greg talked about, whether you should increase salaries to meet that $47,000 threshold and maintain the exempt status, or determine whether it's best to reclassify workers into an hourly position to keep that minimum 40 hours per week. Also, pay close attention to your project managers, your foremen, and their duties. As Greg mentioned before, the duties test it doesn't matter for purposes of what the job description might be. It's for what they're actually doing. So is it better to restructure those positions, assign tasks to salaried employees, or restructure them so the work can be done within 40 weeks? So again, once you do an audit of your position, you know who's going to be affected, then you're going to be in the best place to decide what adjustments do I need to make to meet these new rules, and how can I be creative in doing that. A note about seasonal workers, because in the construction industry, we deal with a lot of seasonal employees. For this, it's important to note the $913 per week threshold applies. This means that during the specific months an employee is working on a project, you'll need to guarantee at least $913 per week is paid to that employee so you can maintain that exempt status. And overall, big picture, why is it important for us to comply with these wage and hour rules anyway? Well, we've seen an increase in litigation of wage and hour issues, and there's been a definite new emphasis by the Department of Labor on these issues. For example, there's been an increase in DOL investigations and enforcement actions. They've launched numerous public awareness campaigns. Employees know now better than ever what their rights are under the wage and hour laws. For example, the DOL has released a smartphone app that allows employees to track their time worked so they can have a better idea of what the wages are that they're owed. So all of this is just showing a continued and aggressive commitment by the DOL to enforce wage and hour laws across the country.
So what are the takeaways here? Well, I think the main takeaway is, number one, make sure you take a look at all the exempt positions that you have in your organization. That's number one. So anyone that's exempt, you're not paying them overtime, they're the classic salaried employee, make sure you're paying them enough. Make sure they meet that new threshold as of December 1st of 2016. Second, take a careful look at their duties. Make sure that the duties that people are actually working, not what's in the job description, and make sure it's going to meet one of these tests. And in most cases, that's going to be the administrative test. And as long as you're doing that, we're confident that you'll be comfortable operating your businesses within the new and updated rule as of December 1st. Thanks.
Thank you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact Greg or myself. Our contact information is listed on the materials that will accompany this webinar. Thank you.